So obviously, right now it's election time, right?
Mm.
And at the end of this month, there's going to be a federal election. And so far, I might be completely wrong about this, but it seems like only one of the major parties recently released their platform. And I'm sure you've gone through it already. One of the things I think also aligns quite well with the CMA's platform as well was this idea of there are like I guess there's foreign doctors that are Canadian. There's Canadians who had foreign degrees, medical degrees, and they're in Canada. And this there's a barrier for them to practice in Canada, and one of those barriers, it seems like, is this residency. And there's this idea, I think the NDP and Jagmeet Singh recently talked about this idea of increasing the number of residency spots. So I don't, of course, not being in like knowing the process itself, like what is that true? Is that issue and why is it that we have so few residency, and what is the process of kind of like doing that? Like, what is it, purely a money thing that you have to just give money to increase the number of residencies, or is much more complicated than that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe I should explain, just because I don't know with your listeners how many have any idea how medical training works. So, most medical schools in Canada, you have to have an undergraduate degree just to get in. And that's almost standard across the board. And then most medical schools are 4 years of medical training. So you spend usually the first 2 years doing more, the theoretical, more in the classroom type of learning, and then you spend the second 2 years doing stuff on the wards where you're actually learning more from directly from the doctors with patients, providing care to those patients. So at the end of those 4 years, you have to then decide what specialty you're interested in. And we have something called CARMS, which is the Canadian Resident Matching Service. And it is a computerized system where all of the fourth year or final year medical students in Canada, they put in their preference for where they want to go to residency across the country. And all of the programs across the country put in their preferences about which students they liked. And then the computer just spits it out and tells you where you're going. And so this is something that usually Canadian medical students, they get first dibs on that matching service. And then everybody who trained outside of Canada, even if you are a Canadian citizen, if you trained outside of Canada, you get sort of whatever spots didn't get filled, they'll do a second round. And usually the international grads get added in that second round. Um, when it comes to how many residency spots there are, money is part of the issue for sure, because you have to pay all of them. We pay our residents. We don't pay medical students, but we pay residents. Residents are people who completed medical school, they're doctors, but they're now specializing in family medicine and obstetrics and surgery. And so they get paid not as well as when they're done, but they get paid and they work very, very hard. So part of it is pay because we pay all of them. But the bigger issue is really, are there enough people to train them? Are there enough physical spaces for them to work? What we've heard from some of the family doctor offices is, well, great, I'd love to take more residents, but I only have two offices and like two desks. So I can't really take more than one learner, because where would they work? I don't have another computer. And especially for the family doctors that are private businesses, because a lot of family doctors, they run their own clinic as a private business. They hire all the staff, they pay the rent. Like, are we going to ask them like, oh, if you could just renovate and build an extra spot to train another resident? Like, that's not really a fair request. So that becomes a big challenge as well. Is, do you have people who are willing to teach and take time away from making money, because we don't usually pay them to teach? Do you have the physical space and computers and the beds for examining and all of the equipment that's required to train? And that becomes a challenge. And even in the hospitals, you want the residents to get a good experience seeing enough cases. And so you have to make sure you don't have 10 residents attached to one surgeon, because, well, one of them's going to get to do the surgery. Like, that's not good learning either. So all of that is happening. At the same time, the Canadians who have gone abroad for their medical training are probably some of the lowest hanging fruit to get physicians into the system quickly, because they are probably going to stay in Canada. They're from Canada. They're more likely to go back to their home community. So They probably speak the language. They probably have a good understanding of the culture. There's a lot fewer barriers for those folks. And if they can jump in straight at residency and not have to do the 4 years of medical school, the undergraduate degree, for family medicine, that's 2 years of training instead of the whole 10.
Hmm.
So if we can increase those spots, so meaning we need to make sure we have the infrastructure, we have the instructors, that's a much faster way than just trying to get brand new Canadians through our 10-year system to become a family doctor. And my brother-in-law is one of those Canadian, but went to Ireland for medical school and then had to match through CARMS. And your likelihood of matching is very low a external candidate. So he was really lucky. He did match, but most don't. So this is something that is both low hanging fruit, but also still not as simple as just saying, well, let's just increase the spots.
Rats.
Yeah,
I was hoping it was so
really
much
long
easier.
answer, but
No, this is great. This is great. We love these deep dives, sort of deep exploration nuances. But just to clarify, just for my sake here, is from when someone gets matched in carbs, that's for the residency.
mhm.
Residency. Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Got it. And
yeah.
then
So
from
that's
there,
for usually a 2 to 5 year, although some programs are longer than 5 years, but most are either 2 or 5 year program in the specialty, hopefully of your choice.